yourself.
I am joined today by someone who is on my channel for the first time, but I've actually been on his show a couple times. Dane from what is your channel's not forced adversity? Forced adversity. It's actual fandom, correct? That's
now okay. It's for a few months now. It's been that. But yeah, it used to be forced adversity. Before that, even it was actual context.
Okay.
And so it took me a while to settle on, the brand identity and everything. But I'm not changing it again, so don't worry about it.
Okay, but I'll put all the links to his socials and his channel in the description box once we're done. So if you want to go check his channel out, you can. He's got some really very thought-provoking content and some really good stuff over on his channel. So definitely go check it out. All right, so today's podcast is something different. I decided to do this mostly from a personal perspective. I had been enjoying She-Hulk quite a bit. I know it's not everyone's favorite show. There's a lot of actual valid criticisms about She-Hulk, but I am enjoying it for the most part. Are you enjoying She-Hulk? Are you watching it? How do you feel about that show right now?
Yeah, I've been watching it every week. I love it. I mean, accepting it for what it is, which is that it's not trying to be anything that we've already gotten from the MCU before. It's definitely a sitcom. It's more of a sitcom than it is like a superhero show. And I've been appreciating it even more in the last week or so because I've been reading through some old runs of She-Hulk comics, which I hadn't really dug into before. And I'm just like, holy shit, they really nailed it. Like really, like the Dan Slott run. And I'm trying to think of the other one. Well, definitely the John Byrne run. And Dan
that's
Slott,
the one that I remember the most. For me personally, like that's the one that I always go back to. So
yeah, so I mean they nailed it. You can say a lot of things about it, I suppose. There's definitely gripes that you can have with it, like sometimes the comedy doesn't hit like you might want it to. Of course, that's subjective. Then at the same time, though, it's totally adapting from the comics in 100% accurate way, so nobody can say that it's not comic accurate.
One of the things I got criticized for is in one of my reviews I was like, oh, it's very comic accurate for She-Hulk, and people were like, well, it's not, because her origin story is different in the comics and et cetera, and I'm like, everything in the MCU, everything, it doesn't matter what it is, there are differences in their story from the comics to live action. There's not one character in the MCU that is identical to the original story. They're close. There's some that are very, very close. Iron Man's a very close story, but the stories are not exactly the same. So I think it's a weird standard that people have on She-Hulk to like hold it up like under this microscope and go, well, this one little thing's not the same. The core and the feel of the show is very much from the comics. So for me, that's all that matters, because there's a lot of changes that have been made from comics to live action, especially in the MCU, that have been better for the characters, I think, especially in a modern world. So for me, I love it for what it is. And I don't think it was misrepresented, which is something I think a lot of people had complained about for a long time, is that a lot of times you get these movies and these TV shows where the studios kind of misrepresent what it is you're going to see. And I don't think She-Hulk ever misrepresented what it was. From the get-go, we knew it was going to be like a half-hour comedy series. We knew that the tone was going to be funny. We knew she was going to break the fourth wall. All of these things we knew about before the show came out. So I don't think it was one of those situations where they tried to, would say, like, bait and switch us in the show. I think the show is very much exactly what was advertised to us, the consumers. Would you agree or disagree with that?
No, I fully agree. It's weird to hear that people are saying that. I mean, people, as long as comic book movies have existed, there's going to be somebody that comes out of the woodwork to say, oh, it's not accurate to the comics. And it's like, well, okay. I've been a comic fan all my life. I've been into the movies since they've been making them. And it's just something that as a fan, I had to adapt to early on. Like once the X-Men weren't wearing their spandex and they're all wearing black leather, I had to stop and go, okay, look, I should just be grateful this exists at all. And the fact that the MCU now is as accurate to the comics as it is compared to stuff like those early X-Men films, like it's pretty astounding, honestly. But like you said, there's never going to be something that's 100% one-to-one comic accurate. A lot of what the MCU is kind of a hybrid of the original 616 lore as well as Ultimate, especially like early on. So it really, and a lot of it is also, some of it's taken out of different runs that are not really canon in the comics, but they are comic books that exist. Things like that. It's just I find that really tedious and tiresome at this point whenever people want to nitpick over stuff like that. What matters is, did they adapt it from the comic material in a way that works well for live action? And I feel like the show's definitely done that with her. And yeah, it's good.
Yeah, one of my good friends here, Omega, talks about those X-Men movies. This is the era we live in is actually, if you think about it, we live in a really good era if you're a comic book fan, because you have options. There are options for you. Like, basically, if you want to watch something like Peacemaker, can't believe that show even exists, but if you want to watch Peacemaker, you can watch it. If you want to watch Spider-Man, there's so many options for Spider-Man. You got animated movies, you got live action movies, you got the classic trilogy, you got all of these different things for Spider-Man now. There's so many options as comic book fans. I think getting hyper focused on something that you don't like is sort of like you have to go out of your way to be miserable. So it's a little bit confusing to me why people subject themselves to that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not talking about the content creators, and I'm not going to shout anybody out on this. We're gonna reference them, but I'm not going to shout anybody out. But the content creators, they have a reason for doing it. The fans are the ones that baffle me. The ones that genuinely say they love comic books and superheroes. I don't understand the drive to subject yourself to something that not only you have to pay for, like She-Hulk is on a paid streaming service. So you have to pay for it, and you have to take the time to watch it when you have so many other things on there that you could watch. Like, I don't understand that concept. Like, it completely baffles me, because would you agree with me, and I want you to correct me on anything that I say here, because again, you know a lot more about this stuff than I do, that the financial incentive that the content creators have for something to be bad means that they benefit a lot more from keeping that narrative going than actually admitting that something is just okay, right? Like,
no, you're absolutely right. And I don't think I need to correct you on anything. I would just say that, I would add some context to, because for a long time I didn't understand, like you're saying, like, why do these people, not the content creators, I get that, but like, why are people so invested in not liking things, and they spend so much time? And that's how I kind of came about with the term anti-fan, right? Because it's not like they're not a fan, because they're not engaging critically. They if they do like anything, you hardly ever see them or hear them say it. So it's all about, this thing is bad. They're prejudging stuff before it's out. And that's why I call them anti-fans.
Right.
But the thing with the audience is, what I've come to realize is it's a form of social power. So because Marvel, Star Wars, whatever it is we're talking about, there's these massive IPs now that everybody's engaging in on some level. There's, so many different spin-offs of each one of these IP. And so it's constantly in the discourse. And what you get from that is people that want to have an opinion on it, that it's not about the media itself. It's about them having a take on it that gets them, whether it's negative attention, positive attention, whatever. And so often they're uninformed. And in some cases, a lot of cases, these people don't actually watch the stuff they talk about.
Yeah.
They hear it from their favorite YouTubers, and then they go around to comment sections like yours or mine or whatever. And, you're talking about She-Hulk in a video, and they'll go, oh yeah, well, it's woke and it's not comic accurate. And it's like, tell me how you came to that opinion. Well, they probably saw someone else or heard someone else say it. But yeah, so it's really just a form of like social power, social capital kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the things I thought about today, and I was trying to think of a good example for like why aligning yourselves with that type of community is bad for you personally versus like what it means for them. And I thought about it. I was like, imagine you're in a room in a house full of people that all love different kinds of things, like Star Wars or X-Men or Spider-Man or whatever. And you're in the room of people that hate the color yellow, right? You hate that color. Yellow is your least favorite color. You can't stand it. You just cannot talk enough about how much you hate the color yellow. And then someone who isn't in the room with you just walks by the door in a yellow shirt. And everybody in that room who hates yellow is like, oh, I hate yellow so much. It's so bad. I'll never wear yellow. I'll never paint my house yellow. You'll never catch me in the color yellow. And then they walk outside the door to look at this person, and they see that the person is a woman. And then a few of the people that hate yellow are like, oh, that woman, I can't believe that she's wearing yellow. What, women shouldn't be wearing yellow and all these other things. And you're sitting there in that group and you're like, oh, I just hated the color yellow. I don't have a problem with a woman wearing any color she wants to wear. I just hate yellow. And then they realize the woman is black. And then they're like, oh, she's also a black person. How dare that she wears yellow, And then all of a sudden you see this community turning into like a mob where you're like, I just came here because I didn't like yellow. But now I see there are people in the community that have other issues that are going on. And you have a choice at that point. Do you stay in that anti-yellow community that sort of devolved into what it, like this misogynistic, like racist community? Or do you go, you know what? I hate yellow, but I'm okay with just like walking away from that. Or I'm okay with not aligning myself with that group, because you can absolutely be someone that hates a TV show or a movie, but once it goes into the point of like, misogyny and racism, and you see it happening, you don't have to continue to remind people how much you hate it, because then you're just going to get grouped in with all those people.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better example than that. In my head, I'm like, that totally makes sense to me. Like, not everyone that dislikes She-Hulk is a misogynist, but
right.
There are people within that community that are, and you don't have to continue to add to that narrative if you're not. So when people are like, it's not me, good. Okay. It's not you. You get caught up with that.
Everybody likes to, people just want to have their opinions known on things. And a good example of this, honestly, and I'm not trying to like throw anybody that replied to my tweet earlier under the bus, but like I'd sent out a tweet, in anticipation of this stream and asking, what do you feel like? Do you feel like Phase 4 has done a good job with representation or whatever? And then I get several people replying like, I don't like this movie and this movie. I think this movie kind of sucks and it didn't do great on the box office. And I'm like, I didn't ask that at all. I was asking about what you think about the representation. And so people just love an opportunity to say what they think, especially when it's a negative opinion.
Yeah.
It just seems, I don't know, less cool to talk about something positively in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's important also for the people that watch my channel here, because one of the reasons a lot of people came to my channel is I'm very honest about how I feel about the shows that I'm watching and movies that I'm watching. Like, I love The Flash, but I realize The Flash is not a perfect show at all. It has a ton of problems, and I'm willing to point those out. But the thing is, I don't dogpile. I don't start attacking the shows or the actors or people involved with it, or this actor said something completely unrelated to The Flash, and now I have to sort of make 20 videos about, like, I think that's a very toxic place to be in, where if you don't enjoy something, you can just walk away from it. And I used to watch, are you familiar with the show Legends of Tomorrow? You familiar with that show at all? Okay.
Yeah, I watched the first season or so, I think.
Okay. That was a show that I enjoyed all the way up till about season 4. And then it became a show where every week when I was doing reviews about it, I felt like it was just me repeating the same negative opinions that I had of the show, because the show had gone in a direction that I just didn't find interesting. And so I decided at a certain point, even though I had been reviewing it for years on my channel, that it was time for me to step away from it.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a healthy decision. It's something that I think was better for me, because at the end of the season, I could binge watch it and I wasn't hyper focused on all the things that I dislike about it. And I know that's how a lot of the content creators are who make these kinds of videos. You go into watching something in bad faith because you already know that your goal is to find things that you don't like about it. Right. So you get done with that. You're writing your review up. You're not going to put anything in there that you loved, because then you would have to admit that maybe it's good. So you're just focused on the negative. And that's where I was. I was one of those people. Like right before I stopped reviewing Legends of Tomorrow, all of my content for that was so bad. And I hate that it ever got there. I should have stopped a lot sooner. And so I recognized that and I stopped doing it. So I know it's possible, and I know how people operate in that space, right? I understand that. So for me, making content about She-Hulk has been really difficult because I did a test. I went on an incognito tab on YouTube and I typed in She-Hulk reviews like 5 different times. And I went into the top 10 to see how much YouTube was pushing content out to me that was either not really a review or part of like just a negative group, right?
Right.
And my content was nowhere in the top 20 or 30. And people that were talking positively were like 1 out of 8 or 9 of those videos. But I know those channels exist. It's just YouTube isn't pushing that out. They're pushing out these other channels because they have been talking about She-Hulk well before anybody else started talking about it, because they started like going in on She-Hulk before we even knew what the show was going to be. Like they were attacking it from the very beginning. So their channels have been doing it for so long that YouTube just recommends those channels. So they have like a leg up. Plus they make 5 times as many videos as people that love the show.
Exactly that. Yeah, it's really rough trying to I had somebody tell me that you just need to make more videos so you can keep up with them. I'm like, man, I can't keep up with that, because I said on a recent video where they're not really actually giving their opinions. It's like you're saying, they're just kind of repeating what they've already decided a long time ago and getting the videos out just to play the algorithm. Whereas like most fans aren't going to make the same video over and over again.
Right.
It's just like if you love a show, even it's like, I love this show. All right, I'll talk to you about it next week. But what they do is they ride the algorithm, the trending status of stuff. So like when She-Hulk is currently airing, they're going to make several videos a week about it, because that's going to catch
for a show that nobody cares about. That's the other thing, is that I hear nobody likes it. It's not doing well. Nobody's watching it. Well, if nobody's watching it, how do you manage to make like a half dozen videos a week about a show that no one is watching? I don't understand that.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense to me.
It's ridiculous. I did a little like 1 minute of YouTube short about one of those guys that did that, and how he'd been making videos for almost 2 years since the show was initially announced. Mm-hmm. And then after the show started airing, he's playing, or putting out like a video every couple of days or so about how nobody cares about She-Hulk. And I went to his channel and counted up all the videos he's done, and it's like 12, 13 videos. And this was a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure he's got a few more. And it just really highlights the absurdity of it, and like you said, the bad faith of it, because he never had any intention of watching this with any kind of honesty or talking about it with any kind of good faith. It's all just making clickbait outrage content.
And my friend Omega made a good point. Like, I think a lot of the reasons I'm getting the negativity on my She-Hulk reviews now, which is why I didn't do one last week, is because when people watch those videos, if you do a video, you get recommended in their videos. So people are like, oh, here's someone that likes the show. I'm going to click on it and then go leave a comment letting them know that I'm not watching it, which doesn't make any sense. I mean,
well, that's another thing that I use to discern, differentiate between fans and anti-fans, right? Is like most people aren't going to waste time and energy commenting with something that they just vehemently disagree with. Like every once in a while, I might come across a video and I'm, give it a shot, and they have a really bad take or something, and I'll say, I don't think this is a good take, and I'll tell them why. Mm-hmm. But it's very rare that I do that. But these guys, it's almost like their default is to comment negative shit on videos that don't agree with what they think. Right. And that's a completely different way of engaging with this stuff than I think is healthy for the individual or fandom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am, when I decided to make this podcast, I was like, do I want to do a one-off thing where I just get to vent? And then I'm like, why not make it a regular, like twice a month series where I can like pick up stuff that I want to bring attention to? Because I think the idea of just ignoring the negativity and having it go away, we're beyond that at this point. I don't think there's any reality where I can continue to do what I'm doing on YouTube and not address what's happening, because it's starting to spill over into like just everything that I'm doing, all of my content.
Yeah, it's something that I deal with pretty semi-regularly. I had that discussion today. I had it a couple of weeks ago. I did like a whole stream segment about it, where every once in a while, somebody that I actually, have respect for and generally agree with about things will say, not directly to me usually, but I'll see them say something like, these guys that talk about woke this, SJW media that, why don't we just ignore them? Just let them do their thing in the corner and they'll go away or whatever. And there is I understand that inclination, that impulse. There is some superficial wisdom to that. You would think that that would be the case, but the fact is these guys have been dominating YouTube. That's the reason that, you know, like you were describing, you can't search for anything without seeing mostly their content.
Right.
And that's because they just dominate it strictly by how the algorithm operates and by how the most sensational, outrage-based content is more clickable. And that's what all it takes. So it's not a good idea to just ignore it. I don't think that everybody should address it in the way that I do, you know, or as often as I do. But like I made a video sometime last year where I was just asking my audience generally, do you think that, you know, like regular fan YouTube channels should address this stuff every once in a while, at least, you know, like Comics Explained and, you know, comic tropes.
The bigger channels that have a much wider net,
right?
Than, like
right.
we do, yeah.
And my question was, you know, I didn't really have an answer. I wasn't like approaching it from like, this is what I think. It was genuinely just, do they have an obligation with their platforms as large as they are to just every once in a while, you know, deal with it? But I don't know. It's frustrating. I mean, I'm also just glad that those channels are out there at all.
Yeah.
You know, so
I don't know, because I tell everybody all the time, I don't want to be a content police. Like, I'm not out here trying to tell people what kind of content they should make or what they shouldn't make or those kinds of things. I just want to do what I want to do, right? I want to take care of my channel and put out the stuff that I love. But the problem is that when what you're doing is getting sucked into like this group that you just don't feel comfortable being a part of, like if I go in and I make a video about anything that they're talking about, it's gonna cross over with that content. Like, it's just, there's no way to avoid that anymore. And for me, it's been rough, you know, because I'm obviously not a super big channel, you know, on YouTube, but you know, every once in a while I'll do a video, it'll do really well, and you know, people will watch it, and you know, I get some comments under there, and you know, it is what it is. But it's enough that I get recommended with those channels. Like, I see my videos pop up on the sides whenever somebody sends me a link to it. I actually looked through YouTube's terms of service for thumbnails because they've updated it since like the last time I looked at it. Almost all of the channels that do content like that are breaking that rule. All of them are. And somehow,
what's the rule?
That you're not supposed to put in thumbnails harassing, violent, or like hateful content, like in thumbnails. And I think pretty much every thumbnail I see in that genre of YouTube breaks those rules.
Well, I mean, I'm sure I would agree with you. Like, if we were to pull some of them up and look at the thumbnails right now, we would probably agree on them. But I think that we probably have, YouTube probably has a little bit more of a relaxed
absolutely
definition of these things. Is the
that's
problem.
Why I'm not even going to go on that tirade, because that's literally whatever they decide to enforce. But it's just odd to me that my streams, and I've told you about this, and people here know this, my streams have been completely blocked and my channel's been in jeopardy.
Oh yeah,
for talking about really silly things that Paigey has talked about, and my channel gets hit for stuff, and we're not even really doing anything wrong. But then I see these other channels making like blatant violations of YouTube rules, and nothing happens.
It's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating because I was talking to somebody about this today, that the way YouTube basically works, all social media, but YouTube, and you know, in particular, it just favors, you know, certain types of I guess you would say socio-political mindsets, right? And culture. And it's really, really upsetting because, you know, like we were just talking about, when it comes to, you put out certain content and your goal is to just, hey, I want to appreciate this or even criticize this thing. You're not going to do that, you know, 7 times a week or whatever. But I don't know. So, you know, that's why I think we just need as many people as possible, you know, as much as someone is able to, as much as you can stand it. You know what I mean? We should be pushing back against this stuff. And like I was telling a guy today who said, you know, I just think we need to leave them alone and ignore them. And I'm like, yeah, you just can't though, because the thing is with Marvel, Star Wars, all this stuff being the biggest IP in the world, like it's it's crushing right now. And that's great for me as a lifelong fan of this stuff. But then there are kids who will go see an Avengers movie or whatever, and then get home and go, I want to look up some stuff about the Avengers.
Right.
And they get on YouTube, and then like you described, that's what happens. They
Yeah.
they see a bunch of that, and all it takes is, you know, you got to think, if they are completely oblivious to cultural conversation or anything about the context of the media that they are getting interested in, and then they see those kinds of videos of people repeating this stuff, saying, you know, they're ruining it with wokeness or SJ, you know, whatever it is. It doesn't take, you know, very long to fall down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And it's
and the reality is that once you, and this is how YouTube works, and this is not really, I don't think it's something they can fix, but like if you go and you search like say for example She-Hulk review or Avengers review or something like that, or Captain Marvel review, and you click on one video in that community, the next thing you know, the only thing you're seeing when you search for stuff is one of those like 8 to 10 channels. That's all you're seeing. And it becomes a like a bottomless pit of stuff like that. And that's primarily how the algorithm works. There's really the one credit I can give to the community that is into like the sensationalization of all of this is that they understand how YouTube's system works. They've learned how to really manipulate the system. And that's an organizational thing that I think that they've succeeded in.
Yeah.
That I don't know if all the other like fandom channels have been able to really do, you know?
Well, I mean, the thing is it takes zero creativity. It literally just takes, you know, understanding how how to fill out the keywords and how frequently to put out videos. And I've said before that if you divorce the ethics from what they do, it's actually impressive. You know what I mean? But can't really divorce the ethics from it. So no. I don't, but like, you know, yeah, it would be impressive if it was anything else that they were covering, or, you know, in a kind of honest or not harmful way. But
yeah. So Paige makes a good point here. Issue is that back in the 90s, 2000s, all this stuff was on forums and stuff like that. And now they weren't easy to be dragged into. Nowadays, people are dragged in through recommended videos and searches. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, I'm so old. I was on the internet in 1989, so I know how all that stuff works. But anyway, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this whole, I can't believe I'm even saying this because I hate saying it, the MCU, and the diversity and inclusivity being the death of the Marvel cinematic universe. Now, I've got some notes over here, so I'm going to be reading from these. So excuse me if I'm not looking at the camera, but financially speaking, Phase 4 has been very profitable for the MCU. It's a tentpole franchise, and I had to put this in there. For those that don't understand, that means a studio can take losses on certain projects because it makes up for it elsewhere. So, for example, if Black Widow doesn't perform as well as expected, but Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness does better than expected, it evens out and it benefits them as a tentpole franchise, right? I mean, that's basically what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Is that everything sort of has the support of being part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All right. So Phase 4 has 6 movies and it's made almost $4 billion. Right now it's at 3.916 billion to be exact, on a budget of 1.2 million. And it's, you know, Marvel's really achieved like this, like 200 million or less per movie thing. I don't know if you've noticed that recently, but it seems like everything they're doing is with an 100 to 150 million with like a $50 million advertising budget. And everything in the MCU right now falls into that financial box pretty much, which is amazing that they've been able to do that. I mean, they've been doing it for so long. They kind of have this formula of how to make their movies, and financially they seem to be doing a really good job of that.
Yep.
But people want to say the MCU is in shambles. So I've got a little slideshow here. My only slideshow tonight, so bear with me. Paigey hates these. All right, so we're going to go through these. So Phase 1 of Marvel, which was leading up to the Avengers movie, which, by the way, is still a really good movie. I don't know if you've watched it recently, but that first Avengers movie is just a solid film.
Yeah.
Which was 2008 to 2012. Now, there were 6 films in total. Also, I have to remind everyone, during this phase, a lot of the movies were not part of the like Disney distribution. They were all over the place. I think Iron Man was Paramount or something, Universal.
Yep. And then even the first Avengers movie was Paramount, I believe.
Yeah. So this first phase was a little weird. But anyway, the budget at the end of the day was $1 billion. And all of this can be researched, guys. I got all these numbers from several different places. They're all, you can check them out. The total box office was $3.813 billion. So that's pretty good, right? That's a good return on investment for Marvel. So, you know, there we go. There's our first one. Then we have the second phase, which is phase 2, which was 2013 to 2015. Again, 6 movies. Phase 1 and phase 2, in terms of like the way they look, they were very similar. Would you agree? Like, I feel like they basically just copy and pasted that formula into phase 2 from phase
one. When I think of phase 2, even though it has some great movies in it, you know, like I'm actually a big defender of Age of Ultron compared to what a lot of people say. But like generally, when I look back on it, I feel like they were playing it safe, playing it right down the middle. You know, and I guess I understand that they were like, well, maybe we got lucky with phase 1. We want to make sure that we don't go off the rails. And then once phase 2 was also successful, then you started seeing a little bit more, a little bit different swings.
Right.
But yeah, they're very, very similar in terms of tone, just the aesthetic of them and everything.
I mean, yeah, and we could do a whole stream on like the Age of Ultron movie, because there's so many things you could talk about in that movie that are good that people just completely forget about. But yeah, the budget was 1.179 billion, so not much more than phase 1, but they had a box office return of 5.269. And a lot of that had to do with just the sheer success of Iron Man as a franchise. I mean, Iron Man, you know, as much as we complain about like the second and third Iron Man movies, they did really well at the box office. So not much there. Now we're going to move into phase 3. Now here's the deal. I'm going to keep phase 3 at 6 movies, and you'll see why in a second. There were actually 11 movies in phase 3, and it took place over 3 years. It was just a lot of movies. 2 of them were extremely large films that the only thing you could really compare them to is Avengers and Age of Ultron. They don't really compare to anything in phase 4. So I'm going to tell you where I got these numbers from. I did 6 comparable films, which means I picked movies like Spider-Man, Thor, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, movies that felt similar to phases 1, phase 2, and phase 4, with not including Endgame or Infinity War, because I think that completely throws everything off. So with the 6 movies that were comparable, it's a budget of 1.2 billion. Again, very, very similar, with a box office return of 4.8 billion off of those 6 movies. Still not as good as phase 2, but that's still a huge return on investment. And we know that they went on to do like another half dozen films. So this phase was a monster. Phase 3 was just a monster. All right. So we get to phase 4, and phase 4 isn't finished. We still have Wakanda Forever. So we don't know exactly what we're going to end up with, but I have a feeling that movie is going to break $1 billion. I have a very strong feeling that movie. What do you think? Prediction on that? Do you think it'll break $1 billion?
Probably so. Yeah, okay. I wouldn't be surprised at all. You know, if it doesn't, then I don't know. It would have something more to do with, I guess,
just how good the movie is, word of mouth, maybe. I guess. But
maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a big question mark to me because of the whole Chadwick factor, right? Like,
yeah.
If he was still around, if he was still alive, and he was still going to be in it, yeah, it would break it easy. But I mean, that makes me question, not doubt. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it hits $1 billion or more. But like, there is that question of like, is that gonna set people? You know, maybe people don't want to go see it because he's not going to be in it, or something like that. But the trailer, I think the trailer got seen more than any other MCU trailer. That first teaser trailer that they did. So yeah.
So phase 4 has only been 1 year. 1 year in terms of like movies. So that's really interesting, because if you look at the money that was spent and the money that they returned on it, especially after COVID, that's a pretty big deal. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. So the budget for these 6 films and 8 shows, which the 8 shows, I need to talk about that for a moment, but the 6 films was a budget of 1.2, supposed to be billion there. So but yeah, so 1.2 billion with a box office of 4 billion basically. And I put a little asterisk next to that because we're not done with this phase. So I don't know what it's going to be at the end, because the last movie's not out yet. The one thing I want to talk about with the 8 shows is, and maybe you've found this information, it is hard to gauge how much money Marvel has made off of the MCU shows, because all we can see is like subscriber numbers, and that's not an accurate representation of like how many people signed up because of a show.
Right.
Like we don't know. And we also don't know what the return was. Like, how do they gauge that the net money they would make from that? Because again, they have monthly subscribers that are just subscribed to it for Disney. Like they might not even be watching Marvel. So it could be over 4 billion. Like they, like financially, there could be another, $1 billion there that we can't see. I don't know.
Now, I would imagine they have some kind of specific internal calculus with that, with how it's all tied into, like you said, everything else on the platform. Yeah. So I don't even know if I'm sure that they can tell one way or another, more or less, what kind of return on investment they're getting on the shows. But generally, I don't know if they're gonna gauge it that way in the same way that you. Yeah.
But I think the point that I was trying to get to there is, if you don't even factor in the shows, if you're just looking at the budget from the films and the return that's been made, it's not in shambles, because I hear that word all the time. Financially, it is on track to be between phase 1 and phase 2, because I don't think you could compare 6 movies to 11 films in phase 3. I don't think that's a fair comparison. Plus, you had 2 major Avenger movies in phase 3. But if you look at it, it's comparable to phases 1 and 2 without factoring in the TV shows. So where do you think this narrative is that the MCU is in shambles because of representation? Where do you think that's just a talking point? Is there some angle that I'm missing with that? Because I don't understand where that narrative comes from.
Well, I guess the most important thing to remember when it comes to, people that rely on that narrative and lean into it is that they don't understand, or don't try to understand. They don't want to apply any nuance or context to things. When it's convenient for them, they will just throw any context out the window. So like whenever what was it? Shang-Chi came out, and they were the same people that say MCU were like focusing on how it didn't make quite as much money as, and they're comparing it to like Thor or Captain America. And it's like, hold on, man. Are you really comparing this character that has not had an established pop culture presence for decades the same way? Like, yeah, people that read comics know who Shang-Chi is, but like that's not the same thing as Captain America or Thor, right? Which even before they had movies, people generally knew who they were, right? Like they've been around in the public consciousness for a long time. So that's one of the many ways that they do that. And it's taken me a long time. I've been doing this 2.5 years now, and I'm just now getting to where I feel like I understand a lot of the tactics they use. And, for example, they'll change the narrative from, like, if something is actually comes out and is making a lot of money, they will shift to, well, but the reviews aren't so good. Or if the reviews are good and it's not, it's whatever is convenient for them to push this narrative, they're going to. And then whenever there's nothing convenient for them, they will just lie.
Right.
And so that's why I don't know. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. It's not like, obviously it's a good thing to
it's not even moving the goalposts. It's picking another sport altogether. It's like we're playing football. They're over here playing like baseball or something.
Yep.
It's completely different.
And I think, it comes from, they start at the conclusion, which is that they want to have, which is that woke equals broke. Despite, and I've been meaning to do a video on that so I can really like basically what you're doing here and show the numbers of these things that they've called woke.
Go through and look at it. It's very obvious that that's not true. They're making good money off of this.
It almost seems like the opposite is true, because every once in a while something they might consider woke doesn't do well, but for the most part, it seems like inclusion and diversity is good for profits. And
keep in mind, when they hit their next film, if Black Panther: Wakanda Forever ends up breaking $1 billion, this phase will actually make more money than phase 2, which was the one that was higher if you look at the amount of movies and content. And again, we don't know how much the shows are making, so it just seems like that narrative that get woke, go broke doesn't. Where?
Well, and then there's so many. There's variables to it too with the shows, because let's say the shows pull people in who didn't really care for the movies previously, but then now you've pulled in future investments or future dollars on the movies, because now I'm into it. I liked WandaVision, so now I'm into the story, and there's really no limit to how they can profit off of that. But
well, Lone Wolf, if you look at phase 4, there has been a lot of dealing with the aftermath of Endgame. Every couple of shows and movies, there's some reference to something that has happened. I mean, a couple of the shows were specifically about that. So yeah, I mean, I see that happening totally.
Yep.
I have, what were we gonna say here? Did you have?
Oh,
you were gonna say
no, I
something?
was just gonna say, yeah, you're right. I agree. Like, I mean, Eternals, the whole plot of Eternals was kicked into gear because of Endgame, and then yeah. Anyway,
so one of the quotes that I hear all the time from Kevin Feige, and this is getting back to the whole Marvel is female dominated and blah blah blah, is he made a quote. This is back in 2019, and he said, I think we're getting to the point soon where we have so many great female characters that those are just our heroes, as opposed to when they are all female, all male. And a lot of people complained about that quote. And I'm like, are you listening to what he's saying? He's literally saying that he doesn't want to see everything as either all female or all male. He wants it to get to a point where this diversity leads to us just seeing them as superheroes. That was the point of that quote. But I hear it misrepresented all the time, as in he wants the MCU to be all female.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead. I had another one here that I was going to read off.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So this was about She-Hulk, and I had to save it on my phone because the actual website, the website that it was on is gone. So I had to like find it and save it. Anyway, it goes, when you're doing a story about a female lawyer who's giant green, or a Muslim teenager with superpowers in Jersey City, or working with filmmakers and writers of color as we are, it's so prevalent and so much a part of who we are and what we do now that it doesn't seem abnormal, meaning from their perspective, like what they're doing at Marvel. It's no longer a headline. They're saying for them now, they've been doing it enough that for them, this isn't something that deserves like all of these headlines and things like that. A woman is directing something. Wow. And I guess he meant that sort of sarcastically. I hope this will become the norm to the extent where it is no longer a rarity. This is from Kevin Feige. So he's basically saying we are good with what we're doing over here. We've been doing it for a while and it works for us. We don't care about the clickbait headlines. We don't think that this should be something where when a person of color is the lead of a movie, or a woman is directing something, or you have a gay character in a film. Those are things that he wants to get to the point where it's just these people existing and living in these worlds. And it's going to be uncomfortable for a while for some people. But the pushback for this shows that Marvel is like, we're doing this whether you like it or not. That seems to be the way they feel about this.
Yeah.
And I don't think these channels understand that they're screaming into a void. Like, I don't think Kevin Feige or anybody at Marvel cares if one or two random channels don't like the content they're putting out, especially when it's in bad faith. Because I honestly don't believe that the majority of the people making this kind of content hate the stuff that they're talking about.
No, I don't think that most of them actually care. Like, I tend to call them grifters sometimes, and people are like, oh, what does that even mean? Because everybody gets called a grifter. And it's like, well, what I mean is they act like they're passionate fans of this stuff, and that they're, telling you their hot takes, and that they really believe all this, when I don't think that these guys go to bed at night upset because there's a woman in something or whatever. Like they turn off their camera, they turn off their stream or whatever, and then they go about their lives. It's really just a matter of waking up and looking at Reddit or Twitter or whatever for them and seeing what's trending. Oh, well, She-Hulk, that's about a woman. So I might as well start talking about She-Hulk,
right,
or whatever. And meanwhile, actual fans are sitting here like, what are they so upset about? Why are you making all this content about it? Yeah, it's pretty cynical, man. I'm sure that some of them believe it more. There's different variables there with, like, some of them probably believe it more than others. Some of them are probably just doing it cynically for the money. It's tough to figure out what their goal is as a larger point, but like, yeah.
This is a funny point. Quindolin, you always have, like, you'll drop something and I'm just like, okay, yeah, I get that. What they don't understand is they are contributing to the success of the stuff that they don't like.
True.
Because Marvel as a company, most of these companies, they just look at whether or not something's trending. They're not going to every single comment section. They're not going to every single post. They're not going to every single tweet, every single video to see specifically what you're talking about. So if you were talking about She-Hulk and you're making 50 She-Hulk videos a month, all that matters to Marvel is that a lot of people are talking about their show. So if somebody doesn't like something, the best thing you can do when it comes to entertainment, especially with these large companies, is don't engage with that content. Look what happened with Morbius. Morbius literally got a second release, even though it was completely a joke, because the studios did not pay attention to what people were actually saying about it.
No, they just see it as represented as data, and they didn't understand the value judgment actually taking place about the movie. They're just like, oh, everybody's talking about Morbius, so they must like Morbius. And yeah, it's exactly how Marvel is probably looking at it. It only helps, it only benefits things to have them talked about in on social media. I mean, Netflix, one of their this is kind of a tangent, but like Netflix, one of their metrics that they use to decide whether to keep a show or cancel it is how much people are talking about it on social media. Not ratings. I mean, that's part of it, but it's not the entirety of it. And that should tell you everything you need to know.
The weird thing is a lot of people wonder why mid shows, like just average shows that seem to be interesting, get canceled, is because either no one's complaining about it or nobody is like cheering it on. It's just in the center, and they get like, there's a lot of shows on Netflix that get canceled and people are like, oh, that was a pretty good show. Yeah, but did you talk about it online? Did you engage with it online? And if you didn't, then that's probably why it got canceled.
Right.
Are there any shows that you can think of off the top of your head that got canceled where you were like, I can't believe that was canceled?
Oh yeah, Daredevil. I refuse to watch a new Netflix show, even if I'm interested in it. I will wait until it's at least been greenlit for season 2. Because I'm just not gonna. It's happened too many times, and Daredevil season 3 after that burned me so hard that I don't trust it. You're not gonna get me invested in a show just so I can.
One of the ones that I remember is Raised by Wolves on.
Oh my God! Yep, loved it.
That was such a good show. Season 2 was so good, and then it was just gone. And I'm like, what? A show with a unique premise and a very cool storyline just gone. And that's just 2 that we talked about here. There's so many because people don't engage on social media. If Raised by Wolves was getting attacked by people all the time, it probably would have had a huge engagement online.
Probably
that's the reality of it. We're seeing the same thing now. We're not going to talk about it in detail here, but with like the House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power series, like just that whole discourse is I'm not even looking forward to what's going to happen with Andor when that comes out. So anyway. Are you excited for that series? I'm excited to see what it is. I know that it's like people are saying it's very niche, but
what I've seen of it, the little bit I've seen people talking about it, is that I'm actually pretty excited if it's what it seems like it is, and it's kind of a serious, more of a serious tone, kind of thing than Star Wars has done in a while. More like I think it's more like Rogue One,
which I loved. I loved Rogue One. That was one of my favorite Star Wars movies of all time. So.
So if it's more like that, then yeah, I'm all for it.
So we're going to move on to the next topic, and this is where I'm going to break down the idea that Marvel is female led, that somehow, some way, it's out of balance, that something in the Force is not working. But the weird thing about this argument, I want to preface this by saying that if you believe that Marvel is female led now, are you admitting that it was male led before? That it was only appealing to guys before? Is that? I mean, I feel like if you're saying that it's doing this now, that it was doing something else before, but we never talk about that, right? Okay, so
right. I mean, there's pretty much all of these points that you can talk about with these people. Is you think about them for longer than 20 seconds, or you ask like 2 or 3 questions, and the whole premise falls apart. But yeah.
So let's start with Phase 1. Phase 1 was 6 movies with no female leads. We had Iron Man, which had Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts, and she was a love interest, which is one of the worst things you could do to a supporting female character, is not give her any agency at all. It's really weird. Anyway, this is Phase 1. We had Incredible Hulk, which was Edward Norton, which we had Liv Tyler as Betty Ross, love interest character, not much else. Then we had Iron Man 2, same cast, same situation. We did get introduced to Black Widow in this movie, but she had very little storyline wise. I mean, we got to see her do some cool shit by the end of the movie, but she was really just using her secret identity stuff, like typical Black Widow shit. Basically, there was a
lot of male gaze on her.
There was,
in that one,
especially in the boxing match with Happy and stuff like that. Yeah,
I mean, not that I'm complaining. I'm good with male gaze.
Yeah.
But I understand the need to have women represented in more ways than just that. So
yeah. Then we had Thor, where we also had Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, and again, Love interest. We did have Kat Dennings as Darcy, I believe, who wasn't necessarily a typical character, but she became a fan favorite. I would say she's probably one of the more interesting characters that was introduced in the earlier phase that wasn't like a main character. And then we had Captain America First Avenger with Chris Evans and Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter. Again, follow the trend here, a love interest in the movie. And then we had the Avengers, which gave Black Widow a solid story finally in that movie. Still not a main, quote unquote, main character, but much, much better. Keep in mind, guys, as I'm going through this, I don't dislike any of these phases. This is not me like taking a dump all over like non-representation of women in these roles or anything. This is me just pointing out the narrative is that women were already represented and now they're being represented even more. That's just not true. So that's what I'm doing here because I love pretty much all of these movies. But Marvel's acknowledged that it was a problem, right? So it's not just me talking about it.
Well, do you know why the main reason that it was a problem?
Why was that?
Do you know about Ike Perlmutter?
Oh God, that name. Yes, we could have had a Black Widow movie in like phase 2.
We could have had Captain Marvel. Like, Feige was wanting to do Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Black Widow for a long time, and it wasn't, and he wouldn't let him. He was just like, you know, nobody wants to see that kind of thing.
They don't want to see like a black superhero or a woman superhero. Right. Yeah.
It was only after the success of Captain America Civil War, when it just did way better than they even expected it to, that Feige had just built up enough clout that he went to Disney and was like, look, I can't have this guy in charge of creative stuff anymore. You need to let me. And from then on, Feige started greenlighting stuff.
That's why when people complain about when we got Black Widow, that wasn't Kevin Feige's fault. He wanted to do a Black Widow movie like years before that. So, all right. So phase 2, we had 6 movies. Again, no female leads. Iron Man, same cast. Thor: The Dark World, same cast. Captain America: Winter Soldier. We do get Sharon Carter and some great stuff from Maria in that. And obviously Black Widow's there, but still at this point everybody's like, where's the Black Widow movie? That was kind of where everybody was. I think she was real, like, if to be honest, that like Captain America Winter Soldier is like one of my like top 3 Marvel movies. I love that movie. And I think that's the first time where we got to see like female characters in roles where they were just existing and being there and being present, which I thought was really good. Guardians of the Galaxy, we got Gamora and Nebula, and that was pretty much it. But Gamora was again basically a warrior love interest for Star-Lord. Then we had Age of Ultron, and we get Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda, which everybody had wanted that character for a really long time. But at this point, we're still the balance. It's still, I mean, we can all admit it's still out of balance here, right? I mean, we have like so many like just male characters, not just superheroes, but just male characters in general, that I could see why Kevin Feige was like, we need to sort of change this up a little bit. I think he could see the writing on the wall with that. And then we had Ant-Man to wrap it up, where we got Evangeline Lilly as Hope. And I liked her in this role. She actually, in terms of the first 2 phases, she was the love interest that wasn't a typical love interest for me. I felt like she was definitely a character with her own agency, her own storyline, and was not there just to be on the arm of, Paul.
True.
Right. So I did enjoy that. All right. Phase 3. Where are our leading ladies at? That's what everybody's asking. What is going on here? Now, I did point out that phase 3 has 11 movies and only one of them are female led. And do I even need to talk about these? I don't even think I need to go through all these movies. We had Captain Marvel in phase 3. All the other movies were movies that we all know about. They're all either ensemble movies or sequels, basically. But Captain Marvel was the first female-led movie in the MCU. And the reason why this one annoys me a little bit is the movie was okay. It was kind of a solid origin story movie. It wasn't egregious. It didn't commit a bunch of sins. It really was just an origin story for a superhero that had a female lead that was trying to tell this story. And this movie, to me, personally, received so much hate. Looking back at it, it's almost unbelievable the amount of hate that this movie got and that Brie Larson got.
Yeah, it was if you look at certain YouTubers, their channels, their output around that time, basically for about a year on either side of the movie. But like prior to it, they were this is when it started becoming super obvious to me how
Yeah,
dishonest they are to
me
me,
too.
because they're making all these content about, oh, it's going to be a disaster, it's not going to make any money, and they're, Marvel's riding on it, but it's going to fail. And then it made $1 billion. And it just, and they kept on saying that it was a failure, and then there was the review bombing and everything. That's just the same cycle over and over again. But
Which I don't know if I've even said it here or not, but if you have to review bomb something, that it's not a failure. Like, that it's going to succeed. If you're going out of your way to review bomb it, you are worried that it's going to do really well. That's just the proof.
Yeah, you said that on my channel, or you said it in a video that I was watching, and then you said it live on my channel, and I'm like,
I think I did it in one of my She-Hulk reviews or something like that, but I haven't talked about it in a live stream before. I just wanted to
such a solid point. Like, it really just goes to show that there's not any kind of forethought, I guess, or they think that they're being clever with how they do that or something like that. I'm not sure, but then recently you had like Amazon and I think IMDb kind of changed how you can, like, you couldn't review anything for the first 48 hours or something, and they got really mad about that because you're taking away their power to bully people, basically.
Because a lot of their complaints about this movie had to do with comments from Brie Larson. It had nothing to do with the movie whatsoever, which is just
100%.
weird to me. Like,
I had a debate with a guy who had challenged me, a few months ago. He saw a video I did on a certain group of YouTubers, and he emailed me saying, "Hey, I want to, challenge you on some of this." I said, "Sure." And we do a, not really a debate as much as kind of a discussion. But he kept on saying that there's so much focus on feminism in movies now, and they're putting all this feminism in there. He even said they're prioritizing feminism over plot and character. And I said, "Can you give me an example?" And he goes, "Well, Captain Marvel." And I was, I'm like, okay, so even if I give you that, I don't think that's true about the movie, that they prioritized feminism.
Right.
But let's say that I agree with it. I said, okay, you're right. That movie was like 3 years ago. Can you come up with something else? And he couldn't come up with anything else. And it's like, because they get these examples in their mind and they just fixate on that. And to them, they don't need to add any more evidence to their theory or anything like that. It's all emotions based,
Yeah.
But
yeah, and the other thing is that I see a couple comments here, and I want to address this here. And I have to keep saying this because I think that this is something that I actually think that the community itself has kind of drilled this into the head of some of the people that maybe hear comments here and there. If you genuinely like something and you watch it and you don't like if you genuinely like Marvel stuff and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to watch Captain Marvel. I didn't like it. I'm not a big fan of Brie Larson." That's fine. There's literally nothing wrong with that. That is not at all what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is campaigns that happen preemptively to ensure that something fails, and then continued narratives that push misinformation about what is actually happening to convince people to bully and harass and manipulate like actors and studios. And that's what I'm talking about. It's totally okay if you don't like something. There's a lot of things that I watch that I don't care for. But you give it a shot. You watch it and you go, "I didn't like that." That's totally valid, right? I mean, you'd agree with that, right? That's kind of
no. I mean, here, as a matter of fact, I think if I had to list probably my 3 or 4 least favorite MCU films, Captain Marvel would be one of them. It has nothing to do with Brie Larson. It has nothing to do with feminism or whatever. Like, nothing like that. It's just kind of, especially at that point in the MCU, an origin film felt tired to me. It's like, and it
was a superhero origin story, something that they hadn't done in like forever. So,
and I feel like they thought that they could kind of like freshen it up by doing they did it a little chronologically janky. Where in her memory issue and all that, and it was a good attempt, but like, just generally, I whenever I watch back through the MCU, I'll still watch it, but I'm not as excited as I might be to watch Winter Soldier, Infinity War, but I can't even I hardly mention that kind of thing, partly because I don't want to fixate on what I don't love, but also because you got so many people that are being bad faith and terrible about it that I'd rather just avoid talking about it at all.
No, I get that totally. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, like, for example, and I know this is probably going to break the internet for some people. I wasn't a huge fan of the Logan movie. Like, I just wasn't. And I know some people consider it to be like peak cinema and it's a great film, and that's fine.
It's one of my favorite movies ever.
Right. I am a huge outlier on that, but it's not a hill I'm going to die on. Like, I'm not going to try and talk people and be like, you should hate it for this reason. Like, I don't even think I've made a video about Logan, honestly. But primarily that's because I'm not a huge fan of Hugh Jackman. So
that's fair.
That's a huge issue. Like, I've never been a big fan of him as Wolverine, because I've always wanted to see like the short, the feisty, like,
same
Wolverine. So for me, it's going into it. I'm already going into it with like it's Hugh Jackman or whatever. But I get it. So it's not a bad movie. I just don't like the movie. So that's it. Like,
that's fair. It. Yeah, and I mean, preference has a lot to do with it. You know, the thing that bugs me is, well, of many, but like one of the overarching things about how fan discourse happens, whether it's just with these types of guys we're talking about or just in general, but like, people think that their subjective taste is somehow an objective fact.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I'll say something about something on Twitter and somebody will say, well, you have to admit it's pretty cringe. And I was like, no, I don't. What? Why do I have to admit that? Like, you know, right. Oh yeah, it is. It's like, okay, I understand you feel like it's bad or cringe or whatever, but you know, how we absorb media is based on our frame of reference, our experience, our perspective, right? So we don't all have the same set of experience and perspective. So,
you know, I've said this for a long time, and I feel like, I don't know if I heard it somewhere, if it's just something that I've always said, but I've always been like, it's okay to like bad movies and it's okay to dislike good movies. Like, there's no rules with that. It's art. You know, art is totally subjective, which is why when people try to look for an objective opinion about art, it's like there's no checks and balances. It's art. Like, the only thing you could argue when it comes to like filmmaking is if they violated some golden rule of filmmaking that breaks the movie. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, it's just, I didn't like it, so no one else can like it. And that's not really how things work in the world.
I mean, I would take it even further than that, but I know that's not what the discussion's about.
Well, go ahead. Say it. Say what you're going to say.
Well, I mean, you know, my question is, like, I agree with you. There are things that are generally agreed upon that are like, this is how you make a movie, you know, structurally or whatever. And if you do this wrong, then it's not good generally. But like, then you look at something like The Room, which is basically every possible angle of filmmaking was done poorly, and
they broke the rules completely.
But people enjoy it so much, and it's like, you know, so objectively, is it really objectively a bad movie at that point?
See, because that's what I mean. Like, you can't. It's hard to even argue that, honestly.
The question becomes, what is it that we're seeking? Is it just the film in a vacuum on its own, or is it the experience of it? And you know, it really becomes about, what do you want out of a movie?
I've always said that, and I'm gonna get to your comment multi-topic talk. It's still here on the screen. I'm gonna get to it. General viewers do not go into a movie with a bunch of boxes that they're ticking off. They go with how they feel about the movie. So you could go into a movie about time travel, like Back to the Future, right? Back to the Future franchise, where it doesn't line up. Some of it doesn't make sense. Like, how does this work? How does that work? But guess what? No one gave a shit because it felt like a good movie to them. They came out of that movie and they loved the movie because they felt good about the movie. That is how the general public technically watches stuff. So when these channels break down why something is quote unquote objectively bad, that is not how most people watch content. Like, I love Napoleon Dynamite, but you could argue all day about why that movie sucks. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't like it. They don't get the humor. And I get it. So,
and also things change over time, right? Like, I've addressed the certain group of YouTubers that want to act like they can judge things objectively. And I addressed them way back early on my channel. And I gave examples like Blade Runner or The Big Lebowski or The Thing, you know, which originally when they came out, they were panned by critics. They didn't do well at the box office. You know, all of the critics thought they were garbage or whatever. And then, you know, basically over time, people learn to see them a different way, or new audience, they find a new audience or whatever. And now they've become classics. And, you know, so trying to like objectively declare something a good or bad movie, especially right when it's come out, is pretty arbitrary to me.
I will say Patrick Stewart was my fan cast for Professor X. So when he got it, I was just like, oh, I love that. Like, I will forever.
He was Wizard Magazine did a fan cast, and they fan casted him before the movies, and so whenever he was actually cast, it was like, holy shit,
Yeah,
they're doing
that
it.
was so good. Okay, multi-topic talk with a $10. Is it dollars in Canada? $10? I guess it is. $10 super chat here. Great stream. I think a lot of the backlash and hate is wanted from the studio for clout. She-Hulk is more due to backlash than, let's say, Stargirl. And Stargirl as a show is much better for me, at least. So wait, and hate is wanted from the studio. Are you saying that the people making the videos want clout? Is that what this is being said here? I think. Yes, I think that's what you're saying here. Yes, absolutely. I feel like these channels, not only is it clout, but it's financial as well. Because if they spend a year talking about how bad something is going to be, it would hurt them financially if they actually liked it. So they're not going to go into something and go, "Oh, I changed my mind. I love it." It's not going to happen.
Right.
Recently, there was an example you posted where they were hating on House of the Dragon until Rings of Power was up against that because of like which one is more woke or whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden House of the Dragon is good and Rings of Power is bad.
Yeah, it's pretty shameless. And it wasn't just one channel either. I know we're not going to get specific, but it was a whole series of, same cluster of guys that talk about this stuff all the time. And it was, like you said, it was just a bunch of House of the Dragon hates men and hates white people, and it's gonna fail and stuff. And that was for the couple of weeks prior to Rings of Power. And then as soon as Rings of Power is out, they just flip the script completely. They don't address any of that other stuff they've said.
That's the best example of why nothing they do is in good faith. That's the perfect example why. Because if you cannot believe someone at their word when they're technically critics, then what do they have at that point? I mean,
but it's like you just said, it's about their bottom line, but it's also about their reputation, which I don't understand how they have one in the first place, but somehow they've built a reputation with people that they can be relied upon for their media takes. Yeah. But if they did just suddenly say, "Oh, we were completely wrong about House of the Dragon," they would lose some views for sure.
Yeah, but I think it's a way of combining, because they don't want to make two separate videos. So like, we're going to combine two things that are trending and just make them fight each other.
Well, that's why
it's like when you say like who would win in a fight between Superman and Incredible Hulk. Like, it's literally just putting the two things together in one video.
It's I've got one of those graphics that I've been making. I've got one about that called the fake film feud, where they'll take just two random things in some cases. Like more recently, they were all on board for Minions, the Rise of Gru, as opposed to Lightyear. And the reason being because Lightyear's Disney, and because it has a 2-3 second scene with a gay couple.
A blink and you'll miss it scene. I mean, it literally was just like, I almost didn't even see it. I was like, wait, that was it?
And yet you can find dozens of videos of these guys, these 40-year-old guys, having tantrums about it and saying it's woke trash or whatever, and that actually Minions is dominating, Minions destroying it. And it's like, it's beyond parody. And but then at least in that case though, they're two films that kind of are targeting the same demographic generally, like family audiences. At one point in the past, this one was absurd, it was Sonic the Hedgehog versus Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey movie. And it's like, hold on, you're taking a PG family movie and pitting against,
based on a video game from like 30 years ago,
a rated R movie, that's not meant to be seen by wide audiences. And you're making nonstop videos about how one's beating the other. Like, it doesn't. Yeah. They'll just use whatever. They make up the goalposts as they go along. Like you said.
Paigey, I'm surprised that they weren't triggered from this last episode without any spoilers, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
So let's move on to the next portion of this. Is phase 4, and this is where it gets kind of dicey. So we've established that there was a lack of female agency and representation as lead characters until phase 3. We get the one female lead movie and it gets attacked. We get one and it gets attacked by the internet. So in phase 4, we're going to see a lot more, right? Because it's the MCU now. So everything is female led. There's no male content left. And it's all women. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't think there's an issue with that, but it seems to trigger these people. So let's take a look at this. So in phase 4, we have 6 movies and 8 TV shows. And out of that, 14 Only 3 of them are completely female led. 3 out of 14, and one of them just came out, which is She-Hulk. All right, so we have WandaVision, which is a lead show between Wanda and Vision. It's a shared show. It's literally the title of the show. The Falcon and Winter.
Her name comes first, though.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
clearly
it's her show. The Falcon and Winter Soldier is two guys leading that one. Loki is pretty much all about Loki. Sylvie is a character, but that doesn't really happen until like late into the series. What If is an ensemble show, but if you really want to break it down, there's only one female-led episode, and that's the Captain Carter episode. Everything else is shared. Hawkeye shared lead with Kate and Clint, so that was, again, 2 characters sharing the lead role. Moon Knight is the main character of his show. Then we had Ms. Marvel, where Kamala's a lead, and She-Hulk, where Jennifer's a lead. So by the very end here, we get the 2 shows where it's 2 female characters. All right. In the movie side, we only had 1 female-led movie, and that was Black Widow, and it was literally the first one in that phase. And it was the first big movie to come back after the pandemic. Well, actually, we were still in the pandemic at that point when Black Widow came out.
I think they changed it, like it was up until pretty close to release. They were still planning on releasing it in the theaters, I believe, and then they kind of changed it last minute. Yeah.
So we had that, and that movie was, and I do want to put this out there. I'm not making an excuse for it, but any movie that would have came out in that point, because there's a couple of other movies as an example. What is it? Tenet, I think, was a good example of a movie that tried to come out and bombed basically at the box office. So the sheer fact that it was able to actually make some money is good in itself. But that movie underperformed, but it was under weird circumstances. And we could talk about Wonder Woman 84 as well, but we're not going to get into that. Then we had Shang-Chi, which is a male lead. There were female supporting characters in that, but it was his movie. Eternals was an ensemble movie with almost everybody was a lead in that one. You could argue Icarus and Cersei were the main characters, but everybody had roles in that movie. Spider-Man No Way Home. I mean, same cast. We just had the Doctor Strange storyline, a bunch of Spider-Men. Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was split up, even though it was a Doctor Strange movie. You had Doctor Strange and the America story, and then the continuation of WandaVision with Wanda. So you could argue it's an ensemble cast because it is multiple characters, but still not female-led. Thor Love and Thunder was advertised heavily with Jane being Mighty Thor, having a lot of screen time. But there was a deep dive. Somebody on Twitter did this. Jane's story arc is less than 27 minutes of that movie.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
She doesn't have a lot of time. Most of that is relegated to the beginning of the movie too. So still very much a Chris-led film. I did like Jane in that movie, but they could have done a lot more with her. I've talked about this on my TikTok channel. And then we still have Wakanda Forever coming out. Now I heard it's going to be heavily focused on Shuri, but we don't know yet. I feel like it's still going to be a very ensemble movie because there's so many characters in the Black Panther franchise.
I think they're going to lean on a lot of those secondary characters. Like you kind of have to. Yeah. But yeah. No.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the thing that they say though is like, I mean, I've seen people say that there's it's too women led or whatever, but then the thing that they'll try and weasel around that whenever you point out this type of thing to them, they'll call things a bait and switch. They do that a lot.
I've heard
so
that,
like when Hawkeye, it's like, okay, this show's about Hawkeye, but then you start watching and oh, wait a second, it's also a lot about this Kate Bishop. And in their minds, that's bait and switch, as in they pull in people who want to see Hawkeye, but then it's not really about him. It's about this girl Hawkeye. And same thing I saw him say it about Shang-Chi as well, because his sister had a lot of screen time or something like that.
I was just out of curiosity when you mentioned that. I'm just looking at the posters. This is literally like the promotional poster. Clearly, she was going to be featured in this movie. Like, I mean, the show. Like, she was clearly one of the main characters. And actually, we knew about that before the show even came out. Like, they established that Kate was going to be a main character on the show. Like,
and then, their standards are completely different when it comes to that, too, because after the first episode, I saw people saying, like, oh, so she's just automatically really good at archery and knows how to fight and stuff. And it's like, they don't even show her getting good at that stuff. And I was like, well, they didn't show Clint getting good at that stuff either. I wonder what the difference is.
We met him. He was already a master archer.
Right. So
we didn't see Thor training. We didn't see Thor training.
But when
Iron
it comes
Man
to
put
that,
on a suit. And
I saw them say that
all this stuff. Like
I saw them say the same thing about Shuri if she becomes the new Black Panther. It's like, well, we haven't seen her, do a bunch of fighting and stuff yet. It's like, okay, well, when we first meet T'Challa, he's kicking asses. We don't have to see his training montage first.
Because people, and I've said this before, but there's a higher standard when it comes to any marginalized group that is featured in a movie. If they don't get some sort of trial of acceptance, it's sort of like expecting them to go through some sort of like hazing ritual where they have to prove that they deserve the spot they're in, but then other characters can just show up and they're like the chosen one, and that's okay. Like, yeah,
it's it's really is a upsetting kind of thing, and that's obviously outside of pop culture as well. It's something that exists, but yeah.
So now that we're at the end of this, I just want to point out Phase 3, I put this in my notes, had 12 prominent female characters, and Phase 4 has only had 10. So Phase 3 actually had more female characters with speaking roles than Phase 4 does, but Phase 4 is the MCU. Is that just because the women are getting more agency? Is that what it is? Like,
probably so.
I guess that's what it is. All right. So here's the thing. I've got a couple notes here, and then we're gonna sort of wrap everything up. I do appreciate you being here, and I know I said like an hour 20, but we might be a little bit longer than that.
So, that's fine. Take your time.
Okay. I've really enjoyed the chat. By the way, the chat, you guys have been amazing. I was really concerned about whether or not this was going to become kind of toxic, and I'm glad everybody has stayed pretty cool, because my whole point of doing this was I'm not trying to necessarily sway people, but I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of misinformation that has led to a lot of the negativity. And I just wanted to sort of put it out there and go, the numbers are there. You just have to go look and see that what is being said is just not true. So if you decide you want to double check me and go look at all this stuff, it's all available online. Feel free to use Google. That's where I got my information from. Not ashamed to admit that. All right. So I want to wrap this up with pandering. And this is where we're going to go outside of just the female representation. So I hear that word a lot, that Marvel and a lot of these other companies are pandering. They're pandering to this person. They're pandering to that person. And this is where some tough love is going to come in, I think, for some people. Hollywood has always pandered since conception. The only difference is they have pandered to a certain demographic, which is heterosexual white men or just men in general, for so long that men don't even realize that they have been pandered to, and they keep asking to go back to that. They want to be pandered to. So pandering, Hollywood is in the business of making money, and pandering is how you make money. So am I saying anything outrageous here? This should be known. Like, this
You're
is
absolutely
exactly
spot on. That's why they have to lie a lot, I believe, because the content creators, right? Like they have to lie about stuff, because if they just said, well, yeah, this stuff's making a lot of money, then essentially they're just admitting that it's doing well. Right. And a lot of the same people are, very obviously capitalists. So like, you try and challenge them on, like, well, why do you think that it's making up? Yeah. So they lie about it, but exactly what you said. That's this default perspective, and me being, a white cis guy, I understand it because I lived the vast majority of my life in that perspective. And, I was never as resistant as some people are these days that I see online, but I definitely, remember having to check some biases several years ago. And when I started realizing that, I've never really considered outside my own perspective,
right,
what things are like. And, that's part of what I try and do with my channel, is to just convey that. But
I love that for your channel too. That's one of the reasons why I came across your content, and I was like, this guy gets it. Like, totally. I felt like we were in the same, like, we're heading in the same direction. I'm like, you were just much better at it than I was. So I was like, I'm going to let him do his thing. So, but yeah, pandering. And I want to point out, there's nothing wrong with being pandered to, because being pandered to eventually leads to actual real representation. It actually leads to real change,
right? Because
everything is perception. Like, our world is not reality unless they tell us it is. So when Hollywood is like, this is a standard of beauty, you have to look like this, that has led to people that have eating disorders and people that don't like themselves because of what they see in media. So what Hollywood does is they pander and they make money for as long as they can. And the reason why we're seeing the shift now, and I'm just going to throw this out there, is because they're not making enough money pandering to that demographic anymore. The straight cis white guy demographic is not paying the bills anymore. So now they're pandering to other groups.
I mean, there's that, and it's also, partly that it's not paying the bills, but also partly that they want more money than, so it's like, for one thing, Hollywood has gone global now. Like a lot of these movies, in the last decade or so have become much more of a global phenomenon where they're not just made and then like secondhand, sent overseas. They're made with the intention of putting them in theaters overseas and so on. Mm-hmm. So like part of that is that, everybody wants to see people that look like them more or less, right? Like you want to see yourself represented. And it's like, it'd be one thing if I felt like they were actually just reducing the amount of white dudes that are, in movies or something. I might start to raise an eyebrow. I don't know. But like, it's really just filling out the worlds within these fiction stories that more resembles what the real world is like. There's gay people, there's black people. Like, why can't we have them? Especially with Marvel, which has always been the world outside your window, right? That was how Stan Lee described it. It's like, it's just like our world, except they're superheroes. Yeah. So it only makes sense that there would be varying identities, perspectives, and so on.
I agree with you. And I do think that within that pandering, there's genuine change. And I think that's the important thing we have to remember is that pandering isn't always necessarily negative. The responsibility of us as a fandom, outside of whether or not you're white, black, another marginalized group, you're male, female, non-binary, whatever it is that you are as a person, we should be welcoming those people into our community. We should want people to come in and join us. Because I said this on your podcast, I believe, is I come from an era when it wasn't cool to be a geek, when reading comic books was not cool, and you would get bullied for it. Now, we are the cool people. And now we have people within our community who are gatekeeping and treating people the way that we were treated when we came up. And I don't like that. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. And you have the best saying. What is it? Don't be gatekeepers, be an ambassador. Is that your...
Yeah, be an ambassador, not a gatekeeper.
Yeah, Omega, that's a good point. I don't want to get into the Ariel stuff. I have so much ammunition on that. I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut right now. But I brought that up because I want to say, if you want to see some good wholesome clips, go and watch like reactions to black girls seeing Ariel for the first time in live action. There's a lot of it on YouTube. There's some in the YouTube Shorts. You can go check it out on other apps. You know what I'm talking about. They can go like TikTok, places like that. Check it out. There's a lot. It's very wholesome, and it will make you forget about people my age arguing about it.
Yeah.
Which is like, why do we even give a shit? That's really what it comes down to for me. Like, we don't win anything or lose anything with, if you don't have any issue. Like, that's the other thing, is a lot of the arguments they make, they don't have a dog in the fight. Whether Marvel does it or doesn't do it, it literally doesn't affect them.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, we talked about Little Mermaid last week on my stream, and like, I was a big fan of the Disney animated film when I was a kid. That came out right at that peak time for me when I was into Disney animated stuff. And it's like, it's not like they're saying, okay, now you can never watch that one again. You can never see any other version of Little Mermaid anymore. You only have to watch this one. That's, nothing is taken from you. Nothing is
that's
negated.
I've always said that. They're not, it's, people like to use like erasure. Nothing is being erased. Like, if you love that original movie, guess what? It is literally on streaming. You can go watch it right now. You got the VHS, you can watch it. You got the DVD, you can watch it. You got the Blu-ray, you can watch it. It's there. Nothing is being erased. Like, it's just wild to me. Like, the amount of people that are upset, which, by the way, you know what? I'll get into it for a second. Let's get into it for a second. There have been 2 other live action Little Mermaids. There have been 2 other in the last 3 years. One of them was made in 2018 that is actually taken straight from the books. Basically, they took the books and they made it into like a live action movie with a accurate version of Ariel in it. Guess what? It bombed at the box office.
Yeah.
No one even talked about it. No
I
one.
didn't even know it existed. So
It's a 2018. Matter of fact, I'll pull up the poster right now. This is interesting. I know this is completely different, but let's go ahead and do this.
well, just real quick to speak to what you were saying a minute ago about, you and I grew up the same way, where we were the nerds who liked this stuff, but it wasn't cool and we would get bullied for it. And then, we get older, and now the stuff that we've been into for our entire lives basically is everybody's thing. And I think that that's where the problem with certain people is they don't want that. They like that feeling of feeling special, like this is mine. And now they realize that, I can't play in the sandbox by myself anymore.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because all I ever wanted as a kid was for people to see how cool this stuff was, Marvel and so on. And now they do. And it's like, why would I complain about this?
As fans, we are living in the golden age of comic book media. I don't understand why people are so ready to be angry and upset about it. I just
entitlement. I don't know. It's pretty small-minded set of values, I guess.
So here I pulled up some pictures. This is the 2018 Little Mermaid movie that came out, and no one talked about it and no one watched it. And this is very close to the cartoon in terms of the way she looks. Like very close. These are some of the clips from it. It's hard to tell here, but the hair is red. There's a point where the hair color looks different, but it is red. But then we also have the 2019 Little Mermaid here that came out. That was actually a stage production by Disney. That was a live action one.
Oh.
That has a Hawaiian actress playing Ariel, and no one went crazy over it. No one went crazy. She's Hawaiian. Shaggy played a crab. This exists. These were just a couple of years ago. Like, that's why it's so baffling to me that this particular movie is now like, oh, we have to go nuts. We had one that was accurate. Nobody watched it. We had this one with the Hawaiian young lady playing Ariel. No one complained about it. But why is it now there's a problem? Is there money to be made in being mad about Little Mermaid? Is that what it is?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's ultimately at the end of the day, what this is, this whole phenomenon is, it's a parasitic sub-industry of mainstream media, right? Like if Marvel, Star Wars, Disney stopped making content tomorrow, these guys would be out of a job. They'd be working, the people, the YouTubers and so on. They'd be doing manual labor or something like that.
Yeah.
But they're bottom feeders. It really is just about taking from, and I say parasitic, like literally in the sense that they don't give anything to the host body really, except for, I guess, they keep it in, going in the algorithm. And I'm not worried about them affecting the franchises. That's not the reason that I do what I do. Like where I'm defending Disney or Marvel or whatever. I don't really care about that. What I care about is the fandoms, the communities that become hostile and toxic because of these narratives and these types of, ideas that get reinforced and spread around.
So the other thing I want to point out, and this is the thing about the Little Mermaid, because here's the thing, I'm not here to contribute to that. Like, that's why I didn't even really want to talk about it. But because I feel like someone my age arguing about that is just so ridiculous to me. But if you really want to be upset about it, wait till it comes out, go and see it. And then if you don't like it, feel free to tell people, I didn't like the movie. Wasn't that good? The preemptive hate is exactly what I'm talking about. And it applies to that just like it applies to everything else. Not only that, but Hallie's voice is amazing. And I think the original songs are going to be so good. And the whole thing is weird to me, honestly. Cullen Prime goes, I love having new people being introduced into things I love so much, like comics and gaming and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
It's literally one of my favorite experiences in life, is to be able to introduce something that I love to somebody who hasn't experienced it and see them connect with it and see them have that experience. It's almost like, vicariously I'm doing it again for the first time. I love it.
And Quindlen, you're right. I've seen a lot of the discourse about the whole, Cap Sam isn't my Cap or something, whatever that whole thing is, about that character. When you're taking a huge L when Chris Evans comes out and he's like, Sam is Captain America. Like, I mean, you're literally telling the person who played the version of Cap that you love, who said, look, I I pass the title on, he's Captain America, and you're saying, no, you're wrong. You're Captain America.
Yeah, I won't get into it, but I could give you a whole spiel on that whole thing too. But I know you're trying to wrap up. So.
Yeah. I just have one more quick point I want to make. Please share that for me so I can hear it on your live. I would love to hear you talk about that at some point. Maybe by the time the movie comes out, you'll have a chance to make a video about it. I don't know.
Well, just remind me to talk about the difference between, and I meant to kind of do this on the Little Mermaid stream last week, but like the three things that they'll get upset about and call race swapping, even though they're very different concepts, is adaptations, legacy characters. Anyway, yeah, I'll do a video about it.
Yeah. I would love to hear that. That would be great. So here we go. Laura says, I don't want direct copy of the anime. I don't see, this is the thing I've always said. Also, I feel the same way. Like, I want them to feel like the stuff that I loved, but I don't necessarily need to see an exact translation of that on screen. Like a good example of like where they missed the mark completely for me, and this is not MCU related, but it is related to comic book movies, is the Phoenix / Dark Phoenix saga. Both times they tried to do it, it was just awful because they didn't keep the core and the essence of the story in the characters. You could do a Phoenix story that doesn't have to like mimic the comic books, but theirs was so different, and they tried it twice that it just didn't work. But yeah, I don't like direct translations because what's the point of doing that?
That's one reason the MCU is so awesome to me, because they most of it is elements that you're familiar with. And you get some of what you expect. Like a good example of that is Captain America Civil War. Right up until the end, I thought we were basically seeing more or less the same movie playing out as the comic book, but then it takes a left turn with, when it goes to Siberia and all this stuff. And it's like, whoa, I don't know what's happening here. And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically what I want to do is I want to wrap this up with something positive and sort of leave on a good note. So I want to thank everybody for being here. All of my Team Eric members that are in the chat contributing. Thank you guys so much. You've been great. Even with difference of opinions, everybody's been very respectful. And that's all I really ask, is that you're just respectful to each other. Because even if I don't agree with you or you disagree with me, your opinion is valid. And I just thank you so much for contributing to the stream. So Victor here with a $5 super chat. He goes, Dane should be in the after party. Does he have a channel? Love the post. Good one, Eric. More, please. Well, I'm sure Dane loves hearing that because, being a content creator, I love when people are enjoying what I'm doing. So, yes, Dane definitely could join us on one of the after parties. I'll talk to him about it. Maybe we'll make it happen if our schedule works out. And yes, he has a channel. Actual Fandom is the channel. Now that I know the official name, I have subscribed, but I was like, what do you want to call it? So it's Actual Fandom is the channel. I'll post a link to it in the description box. What were you going to say? You can do what?
Oh, I was about to throw it into the chat, but then I remembered it's members only, and I'm not a member.
I was going to make you a moderator, but I can't seem to do that.
It's all good. Yeah, it's just youtube.com/actual fandom.
Here, I'm going to do it for you right now. Matter of fact, while I'm doing that, just give people a quick synopsis of what your channel is all about and what you're doing over there.
All right. So yeah, my name is Dane. On my channel, I tend to talk about, if I talk about the media and only the media that I like itself, it's generally stuff that I enjoy or at least am critical of in a nuanced way. If I don't like something, I don't make a bunch of content about things that I don't like. What I do make content about in the negative sense, I suppose, is like we've been talking about this whole stream, just toxic fandom. I call them anti-fans. Just these types of people that bring all this hostility and unnecessary gatekeeping to fan communities and to fan discourse. And I just think it's important that we speak out against that stuff, which is one reason I was honored to be here today. And so I've been doing that for a couple of years now. Every once in a while, I'll do a video essay. I've got a 90-minute video essay on the MCU Hulk and why I think his story is actually underrated.
That's a really good video. I went and watched it, by the way. Very good video. So,
but yeah, that's what we do. About once a week, my friend Little Movie Perp and I will do a live stream, kind of recounting what's going on in the news, a little bit about the discourse around the nerd news.
We need to get him to jump on here one time. Next time we do this, maybe we'll get him to come over and join us. That would be great. He's always a good time. So anyway, let's leave on a positive note. Definitely check out Dane's channel. But the thing is about being better fans is we just need to be aware of what we're engaging in and how we are treating each other within the community. And like I said, and we talked about it here, you know, coming from a time where you were bullied for being a superhero fan or you read comic books and whatnot, those days are behind us now. And we have the opportunity to make it more acceptable and more fun for people to become a part of this community. And as long as you're respectful about stuff you love and you don't love, I think it's all fine. It's really good. Just, you need to be aware of when it goes too far. And I think that's the biggest issue, is that some people take it too far. And be more aware of the communities you're a part of, because that's another big thing, is recognizing when you're contributing to something that is not going to be good for you in the long run, or is going to hurt other people in the process. And that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We went a little bit over, but that's fine. We had a great time here. I want to thank Dane for joining me on the first episode of
Thank you, man.
Better
Thank
Fans, and inspiring me to do this, really, to having the opportunity to do something like this. This is going to be a bi-monthly podcast, so I will schedule the next one sometime in 2 weeks, and we'll probably have Dane back if you would like to join us, and maybe Little Movie Purple join us, and we can have some other people. If anybody in the chat, I know I just saw on Twitter that 3Dub was interested in coming on. I'd love to have more people engage with this, and I'll let everybody know. That's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much, and thank you, Dane, for being here.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
How many times?
I love The Last Jedi.
You know, we're really not affiliated with Geeks and Gamers as far as I'm concerned, and I really just want to make that clear.
Yeah, what is the most recent Japanese film you enjoyed so far?
See, a lot of them would be older ones, like Old Boy, for example. Yeah, probably stuff like that. You know, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I really like that. But yeah, like it's...
I've already told that little son of a bitch. I don't understand it.
Bring organized chaos. So
this league continues.
I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top.
Superman is not black.
Superman's not human.
Yes, he is. He actually is a humanoid. He's just not from Earth.
So he's an alien.
You think we ain't filmed all the things that could stop? What type of gay ass shit?
A garbage series that nobody gives a fuck about. They're using this character and his reveal, his in-costume reveal, in a show no one cares about to get people excited about a show that no one cares about. Seems like nobody really cares about She-Hulk.
I think we may be dealing with the rainbow, if you know what I mean. All right, man, this should go without saying. It should, but unfortunately, you fucking level 1 rookie bitch ass.
Look, I don't love everything Star Wars, but do I constantly whine and bitch and complain about it? No! I don't like, cool, there's people that love Rebels, there's people that love Rogue One, and that's awesome. That is continuing to enhance the universe and bring more people into the fold. But if I don't like it, I complain about it for like a few days, and then I just move on with my fucking life. I don't understand this need to continue to bitch and whine and moan.
It's the motherfucking roads.